Welcome to another deep dive. Um, Today we're tackling something that I think a lot of people struggle with, and that's embracing failure as part of the learning process,
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because we're kind of like almost conditioned to fear failure.
right? And I've got some fascinating articles and research you shared with me, and we're going to sort of unpack all that and explore why failure is really not the end-all be-all, but actually a stepping stone
Yeah.
to growth.
It's like it is a stepping stone.
So how do we even begin to shift that perspective? One article argues that we really need to redefine failure, especially in education, and think of it as a stepping stone toward mastery.
Yeah,
So instead of viewing it as this huge setback, it's more like valuable data
absolutely.
that informs, our next steps.
I think about it this way. Like if you're learning a new instrument, you're going to hit a lot of wrong notes,
Oh, yeah.
right? But those mistakes are not failures, they're feedback.
Yeah.
And they tell you what to adjust, how to refine your technique, and it's the same principle for anything you're learning.
It takes the pressure off,
Yeah. It does.
having to be perfect all the time.
Yeah.
One of the experts even compared it to video games.
Yeah.
If you went into every video game thinking you were just going to fail right away, you would never play.
Right.
But we need that, belief in our ability to learn and grow, even if it involves, stumbling along the way.
And I think that sense of playfulness is important.
Yeah.
When we approach challenges with curiosity and a willingness to experiment, you're more likely to see failure as just part of the process,
Yeah.
right? Not a reflection of your worth.
Hmm.
And this applies not just to individuals, but organizations too. Creating a culture where failure is seen as a learning opportunity is crucial for innovation and adaptability.
And there was a great example of this with Google, where
Yeah.
they really encouraged their employees to spend 20% of their time on personal projects.
Right.
And of course, not every idea is going to be a winner,
Right.
but it's about creating that space where people feel safe
Right.
to experiment, to take risks, knowing that even if things don't work out, the process itself can spark creativity, lead to unexpected breakthroughs.
It's like planting seeds.
Yeah.
Not every seed is going to sprout,
Yeah.
but you keep planting knowing that some will flourish
I like that.
and bear fruit.
Yeah.
But here's where things get really interesting. You think about those organizations where that culture of experimentation is missing.
Yeah.
So let's take IT departments, for example. There's often resistance to adopting new technologies because of the fear of initial setbacks.
Right.
And what happens is they lag behind
That makes sense.
and miss out on all those potential improvements
Yeah.
in efficiency and capability.
Yeah.
And that fear of failure becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
You can really see how this fear of failure can hinder technological advancement on a bigger scale.
Yeah.
We might be missing out on incredible breakthroughs because people are too afraid to, risk stumbling along the way.
Right.
And this kind of brings up a point that one of the sources highlights, which is the idea that not everyone has an equal opportunity to fail. And that's a really important thing to consider.
This is where the conversation gets nuanced, because for underrepresented groups, the stakes can feel a lot higher when
Right.
it comes to failing.
Yeah.
There's often added pressure or a fear that their mistakes will reflect not just on them as individuals, but on their entire group.
Right. It's like they're carrying the weight of representation on their shoulders,
Exactly.
which makes it even harder to take risks
Right.
and experiment freely.
So leaders need to be especially mindful of this and create an environment where everyone feels safe to take those risks and make mistakes,
Yeah.
regardless of their background.
It's really about creating that culture of psychological safety
Yeah.
where people feel supported and not judged and understand that, failure is a shared experience,
Yes.
not a personal indictment.
That's a good way to put it.
So let's get practical.
Yeah.
What are some strategies for actually learning from failure? One article emphasizes the importance of reflecting on those experiences,
Right.
but
Yeah.
not in a way that's self-critical or focused on blame.
Right. It's about approaching those moments with curiosity.
Yeah.
Instead of asking, what did I do wrong? Ask, what can I learn from this?
Yeah.
What factors contributed to this outcome, and how can I approach things differently next time?
One source mentions a technique called the RAIN technique. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Oh, yeah. RAIN stands for Recognize, Allow, Investigate, and Nurture.
Okay.
It's a mindfulness-based approach to processing difficult emotions,
Right.
and that includes failure.
Okay.
So first, you recognize the emotion, acknowledge that you're feeling disappointed, frustrated, whatever it may be. And then you allow the emotion to be present without judgment.
Right.
Don't try to push it away or ignore it. Then you investigate the emotion with curiosity.
Okay.
What sensations are you experiencing in your body? What thoughts are going through your mind? And finally, you nurture yourself with self-compassion.
So it's about approaching those feelings of disappointment or frustration with a sense of understanding and care,
Yeah.
rather than beating yourself up.
Exactly. It's a way to turn those difficult emotions into valuable insights that can help you grow and move forward.
There were a couple of other interesting strategies that were mentioned,
Yeah.
like implementing a level-up grading scheme and creating mastery paths.
Oh, yeah. These are great examples of shifting the focus from achieving perfection to emphasizing progress and understanding.
I like that.
So a level up grading scheme focuses on how much a student has progressed over time rather than just their final score on a test. And so it encourages continuous improvement and it celebrates effort.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a video game where you gain experience points as you learn and master new skills.
I like that analogy.
It becomes less about reaching a specific destination and more about the journey of learning.
And mastery paths offer alternative ways for students to demonstrate their understanding.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So they provide students with choices and flexibility
Okay.
in how they learn and showcase their knowledge. So for example, a student who struggles with traditional tests might be able to demonstrate their understanding through a project, a presentation, or a piece of creative writing.
It's about recognizing that there are multiple ways
Right.
to learn and demonstrate understanding.
It acknowledges the diversity of learning styles, and it helps create a more inclusive and equitable learning environment.
It's really important to remember that mindset plays a huge role in all of this.
It really does.
There was a story about a WGU graduate who really struggled with the science course,
Oh, yeah.
but eventually overcame these repeated failures.
That's encouraging.
And they talked about the importance of, having a growth mindset,
Right.
believing that their ability could be developed through effort and persistence,
Yes.
and seeking support from mentors.
So important.
It really highlights the power of resilience and the
Mhm.
importance of, surrounding yourself with people who believe in you.
Mm-hmm.
It's about recognizing that we don't have to go through this alone.
We don't.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation so far.
Yeah, me too.
We've kind of explored how to shift our perspective on failure,
Right.
recognizing its value, and even touched on some practical strategies for turning setbacks into growth opportunities.
Yeah.
But we're just getting started. We've got lots more to come.
We do. Stay tuned as we delve into specific techniques for analyzing failure.
Okay.
Explore real-world examples of organizations that embrace failure as a catalyst for innovation, and even take a look at the unique challenges and opportunities for embracing failure in STEM education. All that and more coming up after the break.
Let's kind of dig a little bit deeper into some of those strategies for turning those setbacks into growth opportunities.
Right.
One of the sources you shared really emphasized understanding that not all failures are created equal.
Okay.
They actually categorize them as basic, intelligent, and complex failures.
Interesting. So break that down for me a little bit. What are intelligent failures?
Okay, so let's start with basic failures.
Okay.
Those are essentially preventable mistakes.
Right.
So think of like a baker accidentally using salt instead of sugar.
It's a deviation from a known recipe, a simple oversight that leads to an undesirable outcome.
Gotcha.
So those are the kinds of failures that you want to minimize through careful planning checklists, attention to detail.
So basic failures are about making sure you're following those established procedures.
Exactly.
Okay, what about intelligent failures? What makes those so different?
Intelligent failures happen when we're venturing into uncharted territory.
Okay.
There is no established playbook.
Yeah.
It's the result of calculated risk-taking and experimentation.
Okay.
So imagine like a tech startup that's testing a new product idea.
Right.
They might launch a beta version, gather feedback, and realize it needs significant adjustments.
Right.
That's an intelligent failure.
Yeah.
It's a learning experience that informs the next iteration.
So it's about, embracing that uncertainty that comes with innovation
Yeah,
and accepting that not everything is going to be perfect the first time around.
exactly.
It's about extracting those lessons from the experiment, even if they don't lead to immediate success.
And then you have complex failures, which are a bit more nuanced.
Okay.
They often involve multiple factors and can be difficult to analyze. So
Okay.
think of like a large-scale infrastructure project
Okay.
that goes over budget and misses deadlines.
Oh, yeah.
There might be issues with communication resource allocation,
Right.
unforeseen technical challenges, just a whole web of interconnected
Those
factors.
sound like the kind of failures that can really shake an organization's confidence.
They can, but it's important to approach them with a learning mindset
Right.
rather than pointing fingers or assigning blame.
Yeah.
These situations require a much deeper dive, a more systemic analysis to understand those root causes and identify potential areas for improvement.
One article brought up a really interesting point about how our perception of failure is often influenced by our position in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
And it was argued that, those in positions of power might have a little bit more leeway to fail.
That's a really critical observation.
Yeah.
And it kind of ties back into that idea of unequal opportunity to fail that we discussed earlier.
Right.
Someone at the top of an organization might have more resources and support to recover from a setback,
Right.
whereas someone in a more junior position might face greater consequences for that same mistake.
Right. So if there's a safety net for those at the top
Exactly.
that isn't always available to those, lower down,
Right.
which can then create that culture of fear and risk aversion,
Right.
particularly among those who feel like they just don't have room to fail.
So how do we level the playing field and create a more equitable environment for embracing failure?
That's a good question.
I think it starts with leadership acknowledging that power dynamic
Yeah.
and actively working to mitigate its effects.
Okay.
This might involve creating clear guidelines for experimentation,
Okay.
providing resources and support for those who are taking risks,
Right.
and celebrating both successes and intelligent failures across all levels of the organization.
I like that.
It's about fostering a culture where everyone feels empowered to try new things and learn from their mistakes without fear of reprisal.
So it's that sense of shared responsibility
Yeah.
for both successes and failures, and recognizing that everyone is learning and growing.
Everyone's learning and growing together.
Now, one of the sources really emphasized the importance of communicating about failure in a way that encourages learning and resilience. Do you have any tips for doing that effectively? It's kind of a delicate balance, I would think.
It is. One key, I think, is to frame failure as feedback.
Okay.
Instead of dwelling on the negative aspects, focus on those lessons learned and how those insights can inform future actions.
So it's about turning that failure into data
Exactly.
that you can then use to improve processes, strategies, even your mindset.
Right. And create a safe space for people to share their experiences, both successes and failures, without fear of judgment.
Right.
So that might involve, regular team meetings
Right.
where setbacks are openly discussed, or even anonymous feedback mechanisms where people can share their experiences without fear of repercussions.
One article suggested using specific language to kind of foster a more positive attitude towards failure.
Yeah.
Avoiding phrases like, I failed, and instead saying things like, this didn't work this time.
Yeah. Language can have a powerful impact on our mindset.
It really can.
But using language that focuses on learning and growth, we can shift our perspective and see failure as an opportunity rather than a setback.
Right. Instead of saying, I'm a failure, you can say, I'm learning.
Exactly.
Instead of saying, I made a mistake, you can say, I discovered a new way not to do it.
I like that.
That subtle shift can really make a big difference.
It can.
One strategy that I thought was really helpful was the idea of setting small, actionable goals after a failure.
That's a great way to kind of build momentum and regain confidence after a setback.
Yeah.
It's about breaking down those larger goals into more manageable steps so that progress feels more achievable.
Right.
So if a project failed to meet its objectives, instead of getting overwhelmed by the perceived failure, you can ask, what's one small step we can take to learn from this and move forward?
Right. And it's about celebrating those small wins along the way.
Yes, celebrating progress, no matter how small,
Yeah.
is so crucial for maintaining morale and fostering a sense of accomplishment.
It reminds us that we're moving in the right direction,
Yeah. Yeah.
even if the path isn't always, perfectly smooth.
Exactly. And speaking of support, one of the things that came up a lot was this idea of surrounding yourself
Yeah.
with people who encourage you to keep going
It's so important.
when failure feels overwhelming.
Having a network of mentors, colleagues, friends who believe in you
Yeah.
can be so invaluable
You can provide invaluable support.
during those times.
Yeah. They
Yeah.
can offer encouragement, perspective, practical advice.
Yes.
They can remind you of your past successes, help you reframe your perspective, and just offer a listening ear when you need to vent your frustrations.
Right. Sometimes just having somebody to listen
Yeah.
can make all the difference.
It's a reminder that we're all in this together,
Mm-hmm.
that setbacks are a shared human experience, and that we can learn and grow from them together.
Let's talk about some specific techniques for analyzing and learning from failure. One source mentioned something called a failure analysis.
A failure analysis is essentially a structured approach to examining a setback
Okay.
and identifying those root causes.
Okay.
So it often involves gathering data, interviewing stakeholders, reviewing documentation, just trying to piece together
Right.
a comprehensive understanding of what happened.
So it's about being objective and thorough,
Yes.
avoiding blame,
Yeah.
and focusing on the facts.
Exactly. It's about understanding the why behind the failure, not
Right.
just the what.
What were the contributing factors?
Right. Were there any underlying systemic issues that need to be addressed?
Right.
Were there any early warning signs that were missed?
Another technique that was mentioned was the 5 whys.
Oh, the 5 whys is a really simple but powerful technique
Right.
for getting to the root cause of a problem.
Hey,
It
wha-
involves repeatedly asking why
Okay.
to drill down to that underlying issue.
I like that.
The idea is that by asking why 5 times, or however many times it takes,
Yeah.
you'll eventually uncover that systemic factor that contributed to the failure.
So you're going beyond that superficial explanation.
Right.
Really digging deeper to understand those underlying causes.
Exactly like peeling back the layers of an onion.
I like that analogy.
Each why reveals a deeper level of understanding until you get to the core of the issue.
Now let's talk about how we can apply these principles to some specific areas like education and STEM fields. One article mentioned the importance of actually incorporating failure into the curriculum.
Yeah.
How does that look in practice?
There are a lot of creative ways to do this. For example, teachers could design projects
Oh.
that encourage experimentation and allow for multiple solutions,
Okay.
rather than focusing on a single right answer. They can also use case studies of famous failures to kind of illustrate that learning process and show that setbacks are a natural part of innovation and discovery.
So it's really about normalizing failure within the learning environment,
Exactly.
showing students that it's an expected and valuable part of the process.
Right.
It's about shifting that focus from avoiding failure to actually learning from it.
Right. And providing students with the tools and support they need to learn from those mistakes.
Okay.
So this might involve teaching them specific techniques for analyzing failures, providing them with opportunities to give and receive constructive feedback, and just creating a classroom culture where mistakes are seen as opportunities for growth, not reasons for shame.
Another article talked about the importance of feedback in the learning process and suggested using a feedback sandwich approach.
The feedback sandwich is a classic technique
This
for
is-
delivering constructive criticism
Right.
in a way that's a little bit more palatable. So it involves starting with positive feedback, then offering the constructive criticism, and then ending with another dose of positive feedback.
Right.
It's kind of like cushioning the blow, so to speak,
Yeah.
but still delivering the message
Right.
in a way that's clear and helpful.
The goal is to provide feedback that's supportive,
Yeah,
but also actionable,
exactly.
encouraging the recipient to focus on their strengths while also acknowledging those areas for improvement.
Striking that balance between encouragement and constructive criticism,
Right.
recognizing that both are essential for growth.
Now let's talk about the role of technology in embracing failure. One source mentioned using things like simulations and virtual environments.
Yeah, those can be really valuable tools
Yeah?
because simulations and virtual environments can provide a safe and controlled space
Yeah.
for experimentation and learning from failure.
Okay.
So they allow users to try different approaches, make mistakes, and see those consequences without real-world risks.
Right. It's like a dress rehearsal for those real-world situations.
It's a safe space to fail,
Yeah.
where the stakes are lower and the consequences are less severe.
And technology can also be used to track progress, analyze data,
Absolutely.
and provide feedback that can inform the learning process.
Think of educational software that tracks student performance and identifies areas where they might need extra support,
Right.
or project management tools that allow teams to monitor progress, identify potential bottlenecks, and adjust their approach accordingly.
One article highlighted the importance of fostering that growth mindset in STEM education.
It's so important.
So what does that look like in practice?
It's about encouraging students to embrace challenges,
Yeah.
see mistakes as opportunities for learning,
Right.
and believe that their abilities can be developed through effort and persistence.
So it's really teaching students that their intelligence isn't fixed,
Exactly.
that they can continue to learn and grow,
Yeah.
and that those setbacks are simply opportunities to learn and improve.
Exactly. It's about creating a learning environment Yeah. Where students feel supported in their efforts and encouraged to take risks.
Okay.
So this might involve providing them with opportunities to work on open-ended projects, encouraging them to collaborate and learn from each other, and just celebrating their efforts and progress,
Right.
not just their successes.
One article talked about the importance of providing students with opportunities to tinker
I love that.
and fail forward.
I love those terms.
I do too.
Yeah.
They perfectly capture the spirit of embracing failure as part of that learning process.
Yeah.
So tinkering is all about hands-on experimentation,
Right. Yeah.
taking things apart, putting them back together, seeing what happens.
Yeah.
It's a really playful and iterative approach to learning that encourages exploration and discovery.
And failing forward means that those failures are seen as stepping stones
Yeah,
toward success.
exactly.
It's not something to be, avoided or ashamed of.
This has been such an insightful conversation.
It really has.
We've covered such a wide range of strategies and techniques for embracing failure.
And turning it into a catalyst for growth.
But before we wrap up,
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on something. We've talked a lot about the benefits of embracing failure. But are there any downsides or risks that we should be aware of?
That's a great question. We don't want to throw caution to the wind and
Right.
act recklessly.
Right.
We need to be mindful of the potential consequences of our actions and
Yeah.
make sure we're taking calculated risks.
So it's about being strategic
Yes.
in your approach to failure.
Exactly. Embracing failure doesn't mean being reckless or irresponsible. It's
Right.
about finding that balance
Right.
between pushing boundaries
Yeah.
and being mindful of those potential consequences.
So you have to weigh those potential benefits against the downsides
Right.
and have some contingency plans in place in case things don't go as planned.
Exactly. And there's another potential risk I think we need to be aware of,
Okay, what's that?
and that's becoming too comfortable with failure.
Oh,
If we become too accustomed to failing,
right.
we might start to lose motivation or lower our standards.
That's a good point. It's about maintaining that healthy level of self-critique
Yes.
and striving for excellence,
Yeah.
even as we embrace failure as part of the process.
Finding that sweet spot between embracing failure and pushing ourselves to do our best.
Right.
We need to be willing to experiment and take risks, but we also need to hold ourselves accountable
Yes.
for our actions and strive for continuous improvement.
It's not an excuse for complacency.
Right.
It's a tool for growth.
Exactly. I think there's one more crucial element to consider.
Okay, what's that?
How do we create a more realistic and compassionate narrative around failure in a world that often glorifies success and perfection?
It's a tough one.
It is a challenge, but I think it starts with being honest about our own experiences with failure.
Right.
Sharing our stories, both the triumphs and the setbacks,
Yeah.
can help normalize failure and create a more empathetic and supportive culture.
It's about humanizing that experience
Yeah.
and showing that it's something that we all go through,
We all go through it.
regardless of, our achievements
Right,
and
yeah.
status.
It's about celebrating resilience, perseverance, and those lessons learned along the way.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that failure is not the opposite of success.
Right.
It's part of the journey.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation.
It has.
We've explored so many different perspectives on failure,
Yeah.
its role in the learning process, its connection to creativity and innovation, and those strategies that we can use to turn those setbacks into stepping stones.
Yes.
But ultimately, it's about recognizing that failure is an inevitable part of life
Yeah.
and finding ways to embrace it as a catalyst for growth and innovation.
Well said.
As we kind of wrap up this section of our conversation,
Yeah.
I wonder if you have any final thoughts that you want to leave our listeners with.
I want to leave you with this. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of the journey.
I like that.
It's the bumps in the road, the detours, the unexpected challenges that shape us, teach us, and ultimately make us stronger.
So embrace the stumbles,
Yes.
learn from your mistakes, and never stop experimenting.
Yes.
Because it's in those moments of failure
Mm-hmm.
that we often discover our greatest potential. This whole conversation has got me thinking about games.
Yeah.
It's like a microcosm of this whole idea.
It is, because in games, failure is built into the experience.
Right.
It's not something to be ashamed of or discouraged by. It's simply a part of the gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
Think about those classic arcade games where you lose all your lives and
Yeah.
have to start over.
Yeah.
Frustrating, sure, sometimes. But it was also a challenge, a puzzle to solve.
Right.
Each failure was an opportunity to refine your strategy, to learn the patterns of the game,
Learn from your mistakes.
and eventually master it.
And it's like They give us that safe space
Yeah.
to practice failing,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of develop that resilience,
Yes.
that problem-solving mindset without those real-world consequences.
And what's interesting is that concept of failing forward is becoming more and more integrated into game design.
Oh, really?
Developers are creating games that encourage experimentation,
Yeah.
allow for multiple paths to success,
Right.
provide in-game feedback that helps players learn from their mistakes.
One of the quotes that I really liked from a game designer was, "We need to make failure fun."
Yeah,
It sounds counterintuitive, but when you really think about it, it makes perfect sense.
it does.
If you can make it less intimidating, more playful, even, we're more likely to see it as a learning opportunity.
Like, think of games like Mario Kart.
Oh,
Even when you fall off the track or get hit by a shell, there's a sense of humor to it.
right.
A lightheartedness that keeps you engaged. You might groan in frustration, but you're also laughing at yourself at the absurdity of it all.
And that's what we need to kind of bring to our approach to failure in real life.
Yeah.
That sense of humor,
Yeah.
a willingness to laugh at ourselves,
Yes.
and recognizing that those setbacks are simply part of the journey.
And this brings us to the role of creativity in embracing failure.
Yeah.
Because creativity, by its very nature, involves pushing boundaries,
Yep.
experimenting with new ideas,
Yeah.
taking risks.
Which means encountering those failures along the way.
Exactly.
One of the articles talked about fostering a culture of experimentation,
Yes.
creating environments where it's safe to try new things.
And that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
It's in those moments of experimentation,
Yes.
of trying and failing and trying again, that we stumble upon our greatest breakthroughs.
Right.
Think of all the innovations that have come from someone daring to try something new, failing,
Yeah.
learning from that failure, and ultimately creating something remarkable.
There's actually a great example of this with the invention of Post-it notes.
Oh, yeah.
It was a mistake.
It was a failed experiment.
The scientist was trying to create a super strong adhesive,
Right.
but instead ended up with this weak, repositionable glue.
Yeah.
And most people would have seen that as a failure.
Yeah.
But this scientist saw the potential in that so-called failed experiment.
The potential.
And the result was something that we all use now all over the world.
It's a perfect illustration of how failure can be a catalyst for serendipitous discovery.
It is.
But the key is to be open to those possibilities.
Yeah.
To see the potential in those so-called mistakes.
So how do we cultivate this culture of experimentation
Right.
in our lives, in our workplaces, in our schools?
It's about creating safe spaces where people feel comfortable taking risks, sharing their ideas without fear of judgment. It's about fostering psychological safety,
Right.
where people understand that their efforts are valued, even if the outcome isn't always perfect.
It's about rewarding that effort and experimentation,
Yes.
not just success.
Exactly.
Celebrating those aha moments,
they're-
even if they emerge from a series of oops,
Right.
giving people the resources,
Yeah.
the support, the mentorship they need to explore their creativity
Yes.
without that fear of failure holding them back. This has been such a journey.
It has.
We've explored so many facets of failure,
Right.
its role in the learning process, the connection to creativity and innovation, and all those strategies we can use to turn those setbacks
Yeah.
into stepping stones.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of the journey. It's the bumps in the road, the detours, the unexpected challenges that shape us, teach us, and ultimately make us stronger.
So embrace the stumbles, learn from your mistakes, and never stop experimenting. Because it's in those moments of failure that we often discover our greatest potential.
Beautifully said. And remember, the only true failure is the failure to learn and grow from our experiences.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of embracing failure. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and are feeling inspired to see those stumbles not as roadblocks, but as stepping stones on the path to growth and achievement.